Have you ever sat in the still quiet only to find that it's hardly quiet at all? Beneath the surface, a chorus of voices seems to rise. One questioning the decisions that you made today, another replaying a memory that you thought you'd buried, and yet another dreaming up scenarios that may never come to pass. It's deafening in its own way, not because it's a roar, because it's so familiar, so consistent that you hardly notice it anymore. But if you pause just long enough, you might realize something extraordinary. That noise, that crowd inside you, it's not chaos. It's not failure. It's not mental illness, and it's not proof that something's wrong with you. It might just be proof that you're human. I'm Mark Roach. Welcome to Transcendent, my platform where I get to offer you a closer look at the intricacies of being human. Here we don't just chase perfection. We're not looking for easy answers or polished exteriors that we're fed externally so often today. Instead, this is about peeling back the layers that we think behind what we think we should be so that we can see ourselves for who we truly are. My perspective comes from a life that hasn't been straightforward. It's been jagged and in places exhausting in others. And for a long time, I thought that made me weaker and less whole. But over time and through study, comparing experiences, and really what I can only call grace, I realized that those jagged edges are the very places where transformation begins. At first, I built this platform for people like me, those dealing with PTSD or complex trauma, who felt stuck in patterns that they couldn't see, much less escape. I thought of it as a lifeline, a safe harbor for those wrestling with pain that they couldn't quite name. But the more I met other people, and the more stories that I heard, the clearer it became that the trauma isn't reserved for a few. It's written into the human experience. Some people see it glaringly, early. Some people don't recognize it until they're older, and some never call it by name, but feel it all the same. And so this space became something bigger, not just for those who've walked through dramatic fires, but for anyone who's tired of living according to an inherited script. Maybe you tried that. It didn't work. It's for ones who sense that something essential has been buried, not destroyed, but buried under the pressures and expectations of performance and fear. For anyone who's ready to reconnect with the part of themselves that refuses to be automated, bought, or silenced. It sounds lofty, but I'll tell you this. It's also deeply practical. The work of being human isn't just about exploring ideas. It's about confronting the habits, decisions, and beliefs that blind us without our consent. But it starts with the way that we see ourselves. For a long time, I fought to hold myself together, to make sense of who I was by stitching all the fragments together into something that looked like unity. I thought identity was fixed and that the goal was to find one unshakable center and operate it from there. But what I discovered and what I want to share with you just now is a truth that changed everything for me. You're not singular. Neither am I. And none of us are. We're really a collection of selves, a multitude of voices playing its part for something I can't explain. I mean, there's this multiplicity that sounds unsettling at first, as if many means like you're broken. But what if multiplicity isn't really division? What if it's depth? There's a reason that this isn't immediately obvious, that because we live in a world that favors simplicity. We're encouraged to package ourselves neatly, to define who we are in a word, a narrative, optimistic, driven, creative, loyal, and cling to it when life demands more. But simplicity isn't the same as truth. The truth is there's no single word, no one mask that captures who you are. You're a shifting harmony of experiences, an evolving story that doesn't end until you do. And the ones who understood this best, I found, were the mystics, the poets, and the spiritual teachers who dared to look beyond surface appearances. Take the teachings of Jesus, for example. Not the stripped-down quotable phrases that you may see on a bumper sticker, but the raw, challenging depth of what he actually said. He spoke of inner conflict often, and he often used metaphors that could be applied to the soul as much as to the external world. He said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Well, it's a passion that's been used to describe everything from civil wars to petty arguments, but the more I've reflected on it, the more I see its resonance with each one of us. Our inner house, our mental and emotional landscape is full of division. Part of us wants to excel, another part wants to rest. One part holds on to anger while another part longs for peace. And while we try to suppress this division, to flatten it into something singular and clean, that's when the structures collapse. Or consider something from the Gospel of Thomas, a text not found in the traditional canon, but rich with insight nonetheless. It says, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. That's blunt, that's real. And we carry so much inside us, parts of ourselves that we'd rather ignore. Sometimes it's pain, sometimes it's desire, sometimes it's anger or shame or joy. And the more we push it down, the more pressure we feel within. The push-pull of rejecting and suppressing is exhausting. And when you begin to bring forth what's within you, not just the things that you're proud of, but also the things you fear, that's when something astonishing begins to happen. The noise inside stops being a cacophony and starts to sound like the first attempts at music. Multiplicity isn't a mistake, it's a design. Modern psychology has its own expectations for this. Talk about the inner child, the inner critic, the inner caretaker. They're all ways of naming the different selves that rise within us. But this isn't just a modern idea. Esoteric Christianity talks about it too, though often in languages that we're not used to hearing. The early desert fathers, mystics who sought solitude to deepen their connection with God, often wrestled with what they called thoughts or spirits. To them, this wasn't about being literally possessed, but about feeling the pull of interior forces that could be fearsome, but also illuminating if approached through prayer and awareness. This might sound heavy, but I promise you, it's not. It's liberating. To realize you're not one voice, not one role, not one self. It means you're not stuck. It means there's room for choice, for growth, for grace. Instead of asking, why can't I just be myself? You get to ask, which part of myself is speaking right now, and which part do I want to lead this morning? That shift alone changes everything. It's not about getting rid of the voices that hurt you, but learning to understand them, even guide them. It's about reconciling your inner crowd, never perfectly, but always purposefully. If you've made it this far with me, you're already beginning to practice what I'm talking about. You're observing yourself, maybe recognizing a part that's curious about this, another part that's skeptical, maybe even a part that's tired of searching. And that's okay. Pattern and contradiction live in all of us, and acknowledging them is step one. From here, we start to ask deeper questions. What happens when you begin to observe yourself gently without judgment? What happens when you open space for your inner selves to be seen without fearing they'll take over? That's what we'll explore next. For now, thanks for being here. What parts of you brought here today? Now, have you noticed how easy it could be to be carried away by one loud voice inside you? The critic, the planner, the worrier, while quieter parts of yourself get lost? Maybe you realize it looking back on an argument, wondering why you said what you said in a moment of regret, or unable to explain why you made a decision that went against your values. It's not about being stubborn or impulsive. It's the natural result of letting one part of you grab the microphone while the others, equally vital and wise, go unheard. But here's the key. What if instead of just reacting automatically, you could lead the dialogue happening within? What if you could choose not only what part of yourself gets to speak, but how those voices come together in harmony? The idea might sound abstract at first, but it's a precise practice that anyone can develop. It starts with a small change in perspective, seeing your inner life less as a battlefield where one side needs to win and the other, and more like a council meeting where each voice brings something valuable to the table. The critical part of you might urge caution. The dreamer might push for boldness. The protector might insist on saying no, while the nurturer inside says yes. Instead of letting them argue it out, you become the host, the guide, the one that decides how to use their insights without letting one singular voice rule the day. This is where self-observation becomes less about noticing what's wrong and more about noticing what's real. It's the small, subtle shift that changes everything. Instead of looking at your emotions and reactions as problems to solve, you start to treat them as messengers. What are they trying to tell you? What needs to be expressed beneath the surface? Anger must be pointing to a boundary that's been crossed. Anxiety might hint at something unsolved or a task that you've been avoiding. Even the inner critic, harsh as it may often sound, might simply be trying to push you toward a standard you deeply care about, but fear that you can't reach. When you take time to see these reactions clearly, without judgment, they stop feeling like enemies and start feeling like parts of a team, each one flawed but indispensable. Jesus speaks to this idea often, though not in always ways that we've been taught to notice. When he says, "Blessed are the peacemakers," he's giving us more than social advice. Peace in its fullest sense isn't about or just about resolving external conflicts. It's about creating a kind of inner wholeness, a state where where the parts of us that feel divided find a way to reconcile. Look at the moments when Jesus himself retreats into solitude, into the wilderness, to the garden, or even into quiet moments away from crowds. Those aren't escapes. They're moments of internal alignment, times when he brings the outer chaos into harmony with his inner purpose. We often think of spiritual strength as a kind of unshakable certainty, but what if it's really about the ability to hold contradictions without being torn apart by them? The beauty of this work is that it doesn't ask you to ignore your contradictions. It asks you to live into them, to accept that being human means being dynamic. Take the Gospel of Thomas again, where it says the kingdom of God is spread out upon the earth and the people do not see it. What if this kingdom isn't some far-off place or future event? What if it's the innermost part of yourself, that place where your various and conflicting selves come together, not in opposition, but in cooperation? That's not to say the work is easy, but it's worth it. Multiplicity isn't just a concept or theory. Neuroscience offers its own perspective, showing how different areas of our brain light up based on what we're doing or feeling. The regions that govern fear aren't the same as the ones that govern curiosity or joy. Even on a biological level, you're not one single you. Yet when you learn to notice and guide the internal shifts, you begin to experience something that resembles freedom. Instead of being dragged along by the strongest impulse, you start to choose how you show up. Imagine the difference between reacting in a moment of anger and pausing just long enough to say, "Thank you, anger, for not letting for letting me know something that matters here. Now I can respond without causing harm." That's mastery. That's the kind of practice I'm talking about. Not silencing the parts of you that feel inconvenient, but turning their raw energy into something constructive. It's not linear processes. And there will be plenty of setbacks. Many of you may start noticing these voices inside of you, but don't know what to do with them. Or maybe you try to guide them, but you only feel frustrated when things don't go as planned. Well, that's the normal. That's how spiritual growth, like any kind of growth, rarely comes in a straight line. But every time that you choose to pause, to listen, to reflect, you're building a capacity that gets stronger over time. Think of it as laying a foundation. Each moment of self-awareness is another stone, another piece of the structure that will one day become a home for your full self. There's a line in the Sermon on the Mount that always brings me back to this when I'm feeling stuck. Jesus says, "Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Well, at first glance, that sounds daunting, even impossible, but the word translated as perfect comes from the Greek teleos, which doesn't mean flawless. It means whole, complete, mature. Perfection, in the way Jesus describes it, isn't about getting everything right. It's about becoming whole, about growing into the fullness of who you are, contradictions and all. For some, this work will start in silence. Maybe it's sitting by yourself for 5 minutes, just noticing what thoughts and feelings come up. Others, it may start in a conversation or with a therapist or a partner or a trusted friend who can reflect back what you might not see on your own. Others still might find their way through movement, through music, or maybe discover through art, letting physical expression tap into parts of them that or yourself that words just can't reach or may have imprisoned. There's no single path, and that's the point. Each part of you might need a different approach, a different way of being heard and healed. The early Christian mystics understood this deeply. They used the practice of watchfulness, a kind of spiritual awareness that wasn't about control, but about presence. Watchfulness meant staying alert to the movements of your thoughts and emotions without being swept away by them. Watch and pray, Jesus says to his disciples, so that you will not fall into temptation. He's not warning against external danger as much as urging them to stay connected to their inner lives. Temptation, after all, isn't just about the obvious wrongs. It's about the subtler traps, the temptation to believe you're unworthy, or that your contradictions make you weak, or that how you break free from those traps. One breath, one moment at a time. Over time, this practice doesn't just change how you see yourself, it changes how you see others. When you stop judging your own inner complexity, you become more compassionate toward the complexities of those around you. Maybe someone lashes out, and instead reacting defensively, you recognize their own inner crowd at war. Maybe someone seems distant or detached, and instead of taking it personally, you wonder what parts of themselves they're struggling to reconcile. This shift isn't about excusing bad behavior. It's about Seeing others as mirrors of the work that you're doing within yourself, connection becomes easier, not because people change, but because your perspective does. I know this might sound a bit idealistic or maybe way idealistic, but especially if you're in the thick of a tough season, if you're feeling overwhelmed, the idea of guiding your inner selves might feel like just another impossible task in a long list of responsibilities. That's okay. Start small. Tiny shifts matter more than you think. The simple act of saying, "What's happening inside of me right now?" can open a door that you didn't even realize was there and that it was closed. Awareness isn't about fixing everything in one day. It's about planting a seed that doesn't need constant tending to grow, but will take root anyway, slowly and steadily, as long as you keep showing up. The ultimate goal isn't perfection, it's harmony. It's about erasing parts of yourself. It's not about erasing parts of yourself, but about learning how to find and create space where all of those parts of yourself can coexist, not destructively, but beautifully. And in that harmony, you begin to discover not just who you are, but who you're meant to become. I'm Mark Roach. This is Transcendent, wishing you all the best.